Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. It is called Breaking Barriers and Shattering the Gender Gap in Developer Roles. My name is Kelly and let's get started. But first I have an icebreaker question. How has diverse perspective led to an innovative solution in your workplace or in your personal experience? So when has being amongst a diverse group of thinking led to a great solution? Does anybody have any examples that they could share? If not, hopefully by the end of this presentation, it will give you a bit more inspiration and will enable you to have a better understanding. So, food for thought. It's openly known that there is a gender gap in tech. However, despite this, the first computer programmer is actually a woman, which not a lot of people know. So let's revisit our roots and shatter the barriers that are limiting developer roles. So, who am I? As I mentioned before, my name is Kelly, and before we delve into the world of innovation and code, I'm just going to tell you a bit about myself and my background. So the first time I ever thought about engineering as a career was when I was 14 years old. And I actually did a careers test at my secondary school. And the first result was being a teacher. And even at the age of 14, I knew that I found children and teenagers very annoying. So it was a no-brainer for me. The next option that I had was being a lawyer. And I thought, wow, that is a lot of reading. So that didn't tickle my fancy. And last but not least, I saw the word engineer come up. And at that point, I had only really been exposed to mechanical engineering, so I wasn't really quite sure how vast engineering could be. I went home and I did a lot of research, and I came to find out that the engineering world is extremely diverse, and one of the key skills that you need to have is problem solving. And this is something that I really enjoy. I then went on to study electronic communications engineering at the University of Kent. And it wasn't until my first day at university that it hit me that I might actually end up being the only woman in the class. Luckily enough, when I walked in, there were two other girls looking like Bambi, trying to see if there was any other women around, and we instantly became best friends. I joined the army during my time at the University of Kent, as you can see by this glamorous picture of me. And joining the army was a great experience because it took me outside of my comfort zone, and the army is also a very male, heavily dominated industry as well. I then went on to study my master's at the University of Leeds, and by the time I completed my master's, we were all in a lockdown, if you guys can remember that time. So it wasn't a very social time, but I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask other women in STEM and in tech about their experiences. And I wasn't able to find a platform that would enable me to do that. So I decided to create my own community, and that community is called the Women in STEM podcast. And over the past 2.5 years, I've been interviewing women from around the world. I've been interviewing tech CEOs, I've been interviewing Harvard scientists, as well as Google recruiters. So it's been a wide spectrum, and we've covered a lot of different topics. Whilst starting my podcast, I also got my first job as a digital solutions engineer, and I do that full time. So the agenda for today is we're going to understand a bit more about the gender gap, look at the benefits of diversity and inclusion, understand what unconscious biases means and inclusive leadership, look at some success stories, mentoring programs, actionable strategies, and then we'll have a conclusion and a Q&A. So hopefully if you have any questions, you can ask me then. So let's actually understand the gender gap. Right now, there is only 26% of the tech workforce that are women. And when we compare this statistic to other countries, we actually rank 15th, with countries such as Iceland at 45%. So we actually have a lot more that we can do and a lot more growth that can be seen. Historical trailblazers and milestones. If you remember earlier on in the presentation, I mentioned that the first ever computer programmer was a woman, and well, here she is, Ada Lovelace. She was born in 1815, and she's extremely renowned for her work. We also have Grace Hopper, and she is also known as a pioneer for computer programming, and she is best known for her work on common business-oriented language and the concept of machine programming languages. And last but not least, we have Hedy Lamarr, and she's actually my favorite role model. And one of the reasons why she's my favorite role model is because she doesn't fit the typical mold of what we expect a woman in STEM to look like or typical hobbies. She was a Hollywood actress, and she was very renowned at her time, and she was extremely smart. She invented the frequency hopping spectrum that was used during World War II, and her inventions have led to groundbreaking work in the modern wireless communication. I'm very grateful to have such a wonderful role model. Do we have any movie lovers here? I know I'm definitely one. And right now we are in the Oscar seasons of award shows. And so I thought I would just show you guys some inspiration of previous movies that have come out and ones that are coming out in the future. So we have Hidden Figures, which is a movie that came out in 2017. It is a true story based on 3 African-American women mathematicians in the 1960s. And this movie has been well known because it clearly highlighted the barriers that they had to overcome with regards to social barriers and the significant contributions they had to NASA's earlier space missions. And if you remember me talking about one of my role models, Hedy Lamarr, well, Wonder Woman herself is actually going to be portraying Hedy Lamarr in an upcoming TV series on Apple. And they're going to be talking about her life and kind of giving her the exposure and the recognition that she truly deserves. And so therefore I really look forward to watching this TV show. Current trailblazers. Did you know that 78% of students in the UK can't name a famous woman working in tech? I mean, can you guys even think of one? Yeah, it can be quite rough. And therefore it shouldn't be shocking that only 3% of girls in the UK actually consider a career in tech. That number is extremely low, especially when you compare it to boys that already think at 15% of considering a career in tech. This is the reason why I put this slide here to help us remind us of the current trailblazers that we actually already have. So we have Margaret Hamilton, and she is a computer scientist, and she led a team at MIT that developed an onboard flight software for Apollo's space mission. This was a crucial program and software that was actually utilized for them landing on the moon. We also have Radai Perlman, and to many she is known as the mother of the internet. And she has a computer programming, and she's a network specialist. Most of her protocols are still being utilized to this day. And last but not least, we have Anya Howard, and she is a robotics and technologist who's made a significant contribution to the field of AI and robotics. And right now she's working in education, and she's very renowned for her work. So hopefully I've given you some new role models and some new people that you can think of when you're asked of famous women that actually work in tech. So let's look at the tech gender evolution. So if you remember earlier on, I mentioned that there's only 26% of women working in tech. However, when you look at the data in the early 2000s, there was actually only 9%. So we have been making progress steadily but surely, but we can definitely do a lot more to make sure that that number increases further. And with regards to the stats, when we look at Black women in the UK, we actually only make up 0.7%. And when you compare the stats to Black women in the US, Hispanic women, they also only make up 3%, and Asian women only make up 5%. So when it comes to minority groups, the percentage is extremely low. And when you take into consideration that most minority groups come from a low income background and that they tend not to have access to higher education, this can also be a barrier because most tech jobs actually require for you to have a degree, as well as there can be limitations with regards to women with visible or invisible disabilities that we do need to take into consideration. So what are the benefits? Outside of it being something that is good morally, what are the actual tangible benefits? So when we look into innovation, having diverse thinking, having inclusivity, enables there to be an acceleration in innovation because there are more sparks, more creativity. And when we looked into enhanced problem solving, when you have people with a variety of different skills and different knowledge, it means that you can have a better understanding of how to overcome a problem. And right now, we are connected more than ever to people around the world. If you think about the amount of usage we get out of Zoom and other social media platforms, we are able to talk to people further away more than ever before. And this means that the tech industry has widened a lot and our global reaches has widened a lot as well. So by hiring people from different cultures, it enables you to have a better understanding of the way people think in other countries and have much more of a competitive edge. So let's look at unconscious biases. So what does unconscious biases actually mean? It simply means if you have any preferences or attitude or expectations that unconsciously affects a person's outlook or behavior. We have all done this at some point in our lives, unconsciously unconsciously judge somebody. However, most of us do not have hiring power or realize how much of an impact it can have on our colleagues. Therefore, this is something that we need to take into consideration, especially if we want to make tech much more diverse. We need to be aware of this. A staggering 76% of correspondents have said that they faced some sort of gender bias or discrimination in the workplace. So let's take a look at Emily. Emily is an experienced software engineer, and she recently joined a tech company that is known for its innovative projects. But despite her impressive qualification, she's begun to notice subtle signs of unconscious biases from her colleagues. For example, when she's in meetings, her male colleagues tend to talk over her and completely dismiss her ideas. At her workplace, people make assumptions about her role. People often think that when she says that she's a developer, that she's telling a joke. Don't know what's so funny about it. And she also, unfortunately, experiences microaggressions from her teammates, which has been making her feel very unwelcome and has had a severe impact on her mental health. This all has had an impact on her performance evaluation, and instead of her manager giving her feedback on ways that she can look to improve, it actually really crushed her, and therefore she decided to take a sabbatical. Something that we often tend not to think about is we focus a lot on trying to attract new talent into tech, but we don't focus on actually retaining the talent that we have in tech, which is just as important. Leadership roles. 77% of leadership roles in tech are filled by men. And this can have a severe impact on teams and overall the progression that women in tech experience. And as I mentioned previously, we do need to focus on retaining the existing talent that we have. And I'll be discussing in my upcoming slides how we can do that. Here I have another example. And this is Ana Rodriguez, and she's actually been working in tech for 15 years plus. And even though she's been working in tech for quite some time, she still gets excluded from high-level meetings. She's just not added to the email chains, and she's overlooked. And she's not being offered the proper support that she needs with regards to mentorships and skill development, despite making it known to her manager that she's interested in moving up into a senior role. And she's also been experiencing microaggression. Anna is so committed to her job that she tried to take minimum amount of maternity leave so that she wouldn't have such a severe impact on the company or really being noticed missing. However, upon her return, she still received criticism from her colleagues, questioning if she's committed to her role. She really wants to progress to a senior role. However, she's actually considering leaving tech. Her husband also works in tech, but at a different company, and has had a completely different experience than she has been having. Now let's switch up the gears and actually look at a positive success story. And this is Alice, and she's earlier on in her career. And she was actually an air hostess before, and she is a career switcher. She did a boot camp in coding for 6 months that was funded by the government, which enabled her to make the transition. And her workplace has dedicated a lot of resources and time to offer her the guidance that is necessary. She has a mentor that is a woman in a senior role, which enables her to clearly see what she can be expecting as career progression. Her mentor also enables her to have a different outlook on different situations that she's going through in work. And she's been able to have the opportunity to upskill via trainings and certifications. She's been able to build her confidence by making mistakes. A lot of women in tech really fear making mistakes with regards to coding or just making any type of blunders. But because she feels quite confident in her team, she makes it known when she's made a mistake. And during the times when she's made mistakes, that's been the times when she's had the most growth with regards to learning. And after 1.5 years, she actually managed to get a promotion. And she's got a clear path that in 4 to 5 years' time, that she wants to progress into an even more senior role, and she has all the confidence. She also posts on LinkedIn and TikTok about her progression in tech and how she managed to get into tech. And this has had a significant impact as she's got over 100,000 followers, and more women around the world have been considering getting into tech via untraditional roles. And I can actually relate a lot to Alice's story. Even though I did have much more traditional way of getting into tech because I went to university, However, my first experience as a graduate was very similar. I had a very supportive team and I had resources allocated to me to help me get upskilled to the level that was necessary. And I hope to be hearing more stories like this in the future. So, empowering programs for developers that are UK based. First we have Code First, and this is a mentorship program that is run for women who are interested in code. And this program not only has mentoring schemes available, but it also has coding boot camps. And the coding boot camps are available for people who are beginning, so you can have zero experience, as well as people who are in a much more senior position and simply just want to elevate a bit more further. There is also Allies List, and this is an online community for women in tech, which enables you to network, enables you to share and contribute ideas, and it enables you to communicate with women from across the UK. We have Tech She Can, and they focus on enabling women to get into tech. They also have a wide range of resources that are available for children, teachers, and parents who also want to discuss tech with their children. And we also have Code Black Females. This is a community that I'm a part of, and I first found out about them when I first graduated. And as I mentioned, there's only 0.7% of women in tech. So having this small community has been very impactful because it enables me to have space where I can be with people who are going through similar situations as me. They also have a coding bootcamp, and they actually have a return to work program, which not many organizations offer. So that means that if you've taken a career break for whatever reason, whether it be pregnancy, sick leave, or you've been on a sabbatical, they enable you to have the skills to make sure that you can get back on your feet and be able to segue back into a tech role seamlessly. We also have STEMettes, and they also focus on young girls, helping them to pursue a career in tech. And there's actually so many more. And if you want a list, make sure you can always contact me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to give it to you. And although some of you might feel like you can't sign up for any of these programs, they do enable people to sign up as allies, and it can be extremely impactful as well. Actionable strategies. So, as I mentioned in the previous slides, we spoke about how only 3% of girls actually consider a career in tech. And a lot of this reasoning is because they are not exposed to the fact that being an engineer and having a career in tech is actually something that they can do. So I think we can all try to consider looking into early education outreach. That means like going to primary schools, going to secondary schools, making them aware that tech is even a solution, and making them aware of how great tech can be. As I mentioned, mentoring can be severely impactful, but have many of you ever heard about reverse mentoring? That is actually something that I did last year, and it was a very interesting experience. So reverse mentoring is, instead of somebody in a senior role mentoring the person in a more earlier careers role, it's done the other way around. So I was mentoring somebody who was in a senior role. So they would come and discuss things that they were going through or things that they were looking for a solution for. And this was actually very interesting because it enabled me to get a better understanding of what it is actually like to be in a much more senior role. And it helped me to bridge the gap of knowledge of understanding how to delegate and problem solve. Another thing that we can do to help overcome unconscious biases and look at the gender gap is unbiased hiring practices. So unfortunately, people do face discrimination based on their name and their gender. So looking at ways in which we can remove this and just focusing on their skills is something that some companies have already started doing, and this can have a really good impact. Having an inclusive company culture. A lot of people are interested in working in a company that focuses on diversity, and having a more inclusive company culture can actually be something very fun. That can be, having culture swap days as an event, having events such as this where we come and talk about topics like this, and also creating opportunities for networking. So this can be networking within your company, networking within the tech space, as this can open doors and make you aware of new and upcoming opportunities. One thing about tech is that it's always moving and the technology is always being updated. So it's very important that we keep ourselves up to date. And also considering having a return to work program. As I mentioned, we have an issue with retaining talent. So trying to consider having programs that actually take into consideration women who might have taken off on maternity leave or just taken a career break. So we are slowly coming to the end of this presentation. However, I'm going to just recap what we have discussed today. So I utilized data and statistics to help you understand the gender gap and why having conversations like this is very important. I hope I've given you some encouragement of women in tech by showing you some of the historical trailblazers that we have, as well as some of the current ones that we have. We have looked at real life examples. So if you remember the story of Anna, if you remember the story of Emily, and if you remember the story of Anna Rodriguez, these are all women that do actually exist and that I know personally have been through these types of situations. We've looked at how we can overcome unconscious biases by utilizing more practical approaches, such as mentoring programs. And I hope I've given you inspiration by sharing some of the practical steps, as well as sharing part of my own story. So now I'm open to answering any Q&As that you might have. I know that I've mentioned a lot of statistics and I've mentioned a lot of names, so if you have any questions, if you can please type it in the chat or just raise your hand, that would be great. Yeah?
So you mentioned that you're working obviously full-time at the moment. How have you found working in your current company? Have they been really supportive of you? Have you had any challenges there? How has that been for you?
Working in my current company has been, they've been very supportive. I have had challenges, but it's been more so having like imposter syndrome. Which is quite interesting because when I put together this presentation and I had to put the slide on, who I am, I was like, actually, I have 2 degrees. I think I am quite qualified to be here. But unfortunately, sometimes when you feel like there's not much representation, you can sometimes second guess yourself. So yeah, that's been a part of my experience. Yes?
So the examples that you had of people, they felt quite like extreme examples.
Yes.
In that they sounded like just a horrible place to work, regardless of who you are. I wonder whether there's more of a challenge where people are kind of, I guess, unconsciously overlooked for kind of a promotion into another role, rather than it being something that they're kind of actively kind of actively kind of attacked, like some of those examples. Do you think that's something that, as an employer, we should be more concerned about?
So you're asking if somebody is considering just moving within an organisation to another role?
No, I'm just wondering whether, like a scenario like, if you looked at the people who moved from developer to senior developer, for example, is there an unconscious bias that there's a gender bias or a minority bias? Is that something that is actually probably more of a challenge for employers to worry about than the kind of microaggressions and people being kind of more actively attacked at work? Because I feel like those sort of things might be a bit more obvious to see through a kind of a standard HRE type process.
You would think that they would be more standard to see, but oftentimes when women are working in tech, they tend to try to like shrug things off and just try to avoid making any misdemeanors about the situation or wanting to over exaggerate. So most of the time, even though I know when I highlighted it, it seemed very extreme, it tends to be quite overlooked. With regards to somebody not being considered for a promotion, I think that is something that needs to be considered by employees and actually making sure that they are offering all their employees an opportunity to advance in whatever means possible, and making sure that everyone has an opportunity, and if they are not being given an opportunity, explaining to them why and how they can actually improve in order to get one. Yes?
Could you give sort of some examples of microaggressions? It's like, I've heard the term a lot, and I know I've noticed some things, but just generally it might be helpful for sort of, I think when the word aggression is in there, it sometimes sounds stronger than it is, and so they're not that noticeable, so it might just...
Yeah, I could definitely give an example of a microaggression, probably something very small, but for example, as a black woman, people often make commentary on my hair, and actually hair discrimination in black women when they're going for job roles is actually something very common. So this can be a microaggression that can go by quite undetected, and if you're not aware of it, it can seem something very small. But when you feel like people are constantly making commentary on your hair or trying to make fun of your hair, this can be very annoying over time. And this can actually be something that causes women, black women in particular, to have anxiety about how they're going to wear their hair to work, which should not really be something that we prioritize that much. It should be mainly focusing on somebody's skill and their ability to work. Yeah?
Have you found, so you mentioned when you were doing your degree and everything, it was very male heavy, and obviously the industry is in general. Have you found that you had to adjust your behaviour or the way that you approach things to fit in or to get the recognition that you deserve? Was that something that you faced? And if so, how would you sort of advise, I guess, other women to be strong in who they are and not feel that they have to do that to get the recognition they deserve?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier on about like the imposter syndrome, and I think having my podcast has really helped me to focus on making sure that I really try to, when I do have an idea, that I do put my hand up and I do make my ideas known to the team, because often the time I feel like, okay, I just shouldn't say anything, I don't want to make myself look stupid in front of everybody else, and that is not a very good approach to have. I would say for women that do have these feelings, to actually, like I mentioned about the communities that I had on there, once you find communities and you talk with other women who are kind of going through the exact same thing as you, it can make you feel very seen, and it can give you the confidence that you need to be able to move forward. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes?
So you had that stat earlier on about UK versus Iceland, I think it was.
Yeah.
Do you have any understanding why that difference exists? What does Iceland
Yeah, I found that statistic very interesting as well. I think specifically when it comes to Iceland, I think it has more to do with their market and the opportunities that they have available there. So I think those were like the key factors, because even I was shocked when I saw that Iceland was number one. But I found the fact that they had much more of an increase, mile or an achievement that we here in the UK can also use to look forward to. Yes?
Do you know like how that 26% in the workforce compares to like STEM education? 'Cause if you've got less people coming into the education side, then you would kind of expect there to be less people in the workforce. I'm just wondering whether 50-50 is actually a likely outcome without us changing all of the early years education piece as well.
Yeah, so the amount of women that are coming in through like education is a lot less. So then obviously the number of women who are going to be in tech is going to be a lot less. So it is definitely a whole funneling problem that we have going on. But the main thing that I wanted for people to take away from this presentation is focusing on how we can actually retain the existing talent that we have, as well as kind of helping young girls to actually consider this as a career path. But yes, the numbers with regards to STEM is extremely low. However, when you do look into roles in, like, for example, physics and biology, there is actually a lot more women in those type of roles, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I know my daughters aren't interested in IT at all. I haven't managed to persuade them. Even with me as a role model, yeah.
You mentioned your workplace is really supportive, and especially for you and your growth and things, but as a company generally, they got some sort of really great forward-thinking policies in place that makes it a lot more balanced. I know recently Lindsay's worked on bringing in a new policies with around menopause leave and sort of other things like that, but just if there's any interesting policies that we can maybe steal an idea of having things.
Yeah, definitely. I think most organizations in the 21st century do have policies with regards to like gender and discrimination. However, I think the most impactful thing is making sure that these policies are actually being seen through, and that the people who would benefit from these policies actually know that they exist. So with regards to interesting policies that we would have, I can't name like one specifically that I think it puts us completely aside from other companies. However, what I would say is that the company culture at my workplace is very inclusive. So when I came through on the like graduate program, I thought I was going to be like the only black girl. And I did mention that there's like 0.7% of us, but actually there was actually another black girl that came through in my cohort. And that was really interesting, and that really actually helped with my experience as well, having somebody else that was kind of like at the same stage and going through similar things. But overall, in my team, we're quite a diverse bunch. So we're actually split 50-50 men and women in my team. So that is something that is quite unheard of with regards to like the tech space. And I think because we have an even split and it's quite diverse, that meant that we've been like pretty all right with regards to like getting along with each other. Yeah. Any more questions? No? So thank you so much for listening and participating with your Q&As. You can link with me, well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Kelly Princess Shungu, as well as you can check out my podcast, which is called the Women in STEM podcast, and it's available on all major streaming platforms. And once again, I'd like to thank you for listening and participating. I hope this has given you more knowledge and understanding about the gender gap and why it exists and how we can help to overcome it.